Hello, my dear companion. This is Earl Purdy. I want to welcome you to Facebook Live. Facebook Live with Earl Purdy, A Course in Miracles. We're going to be teaching A Course in Miracles, and we're going to talk about creation and communication. What's the relationship between creating and communication? What is the connection between creation and communication? So we're going to talk about that tonight on A Course in Miracles. I'm so glad to have you here. And we're going to start out with Brother John Christmas. And John Christmas is going to share a song from A Course in Miracles that's called Teach Only Love. So here we go. I'm excited to be with you. Here we go. Are you ready? Use this time to get centered. Hello, everybody. Use this time to get centered and to breathe.
Teach only love, for that is what you are. Only love, yes, that is what you are. Teach only love, that is what you are. Teach only love, everywhere you go. Teach only love. To everyone you know, teach only love. Love is what you are. Hey, yeah. Let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Teach only love, each and every day. Teach only love, in your own special way. Teach only love, love is what you are.
Welcome to Hardcore Course in Miracles. I'm Earl Purdy, and we're going to talk about creation versus communication. What's the connection between creating and communicating? Because they are totally related in a way that will blow your mind.
Teach only love, well, that is what you are. Teach only love, yeah, you're a shining star. Only love, love is what you are. The problem so the problem can be solved. Let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Teach only love, each and every day. Only love, in each and every way. Teach only love. Love is what you are.
Just remember this. You don't have to believe these ideas. You don't have to believe these ideas. You don't have to believe these ideas. You don't have to accept these ideas. You need not accept these ideas. You need not accept these ideas. You need not even welcome these ideas. You need not even welcome these ideas. You don't have to welcome these ideas. You don't have to welcome these ideas. Some of these ideas, you may actively resist some of these ideas. You might actively resist. You may actively resist some of these ideas. You may actively resist some of these ideas.
Shouldn't matter, loving what you are. Shouldn't matter, love is what you are. Let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. Teach only love. Teach only love. Yeah, yeah. Teach only love, for that
That was Brother John Christmas at johnchristmas.com. If you'd like to get that music, you just go to donchristmas.com and you can download that music for free. All right, this is Earl Purdy. It's so good to be with you. I'm going to talk about a section tonight in A Course in Miracles that's going to be probably a little bit more abstract and a little bit more challenging because it's talking about the connection between creating and communicating. So in order to really get the most out of this section from A Course in Miracles, you need to remember that some of the ideas you will find hard to believe and some of the ideas might be startling to you. You're not being asked to judge and analyze the ideas at all. In my 40 years of teaching and studying A Course in Miracles, the biggest waste of time that Course in Miracles students do is spend their time trying to analyze the Course in Miracles and fit the Course in Miracles into their previous way of thinking. If you use the ideas in the Course in Miracles, the ideas will show you that the ideas are true. But you have to use the ideas in order to see that they're true. So you are my mighty companion. Tonight, we're going to be on page 69 in the text, the Foundation for Inner Peace version of A Course in Miracles, the Blue Book. We're going to be on page 69. We are in chapter 4, The Illusions of the Ego. We are in section 7, Creation and Communication. Creation and communication. I'm going to sometimes I'm going to substitute some of the Course in Miracles definitions for some of the words to make it more relatable and easier to understand. I'm the divine repetition teacher. The Course in Miracles says that you learn how to accept new ideas by repeating them over and over and over and over again. And the Course in Miracles teaches that the most important thing you can do is to remember what it's saying. And in remembering what it's saying, that's where you begin to get the change of perception in the miracles that you're looking for. It's not through thinking that you have to understand every part of it. It's not through believing that you have to analyze the Course in Miracles. It's through remembering what the Course in Miracles is saying, because it's only talking about love and fear and how to tell the difference between what's real and what's not real. Do you know the Course in Miracles teaches that pain comes from self-deception, that a person is experiencing pain when they are deceiving themselves some kind of way. So if there's any area of your life right now that you are experiencing pain, from A Course in Miracles perspective, it's something about that situation or that relationship that you are deceiving yourself about. There's something you're telling yourself that's not true. So here we go. I teach in a question-answer format. And it's so good to have you here. Don't forget to share this video, please. So let's go. Do you know that it's clear that while the content of any particular ego illusion doesn't matter, correcting the ego, correcting false ideas is more helpful in a specific context? Because false ideas of the ego, false ideas of the part of your mind that's afraid is quite specific. So the things that a person is going through that's causing them any kind of fear is quite specific. Although, do you know the mind is actually naturally abstract. So part of your mind becomes concrete or physical when the mind splits. So when you look at the physical, when you're looking at the physical, you're looking at the part of the mind that is concrete, the part of the mind that is split. And the Course in Miracles says the part of your mind that's split, the part of your mind that's the concrete part. Do you know the part of your mind that believes in separation? The part of your mind that believes you are a body? The part of the mind that believes in the ego? It's the concrete physical part of your mind. And the Course says your ego, your sense of thinking that you are separate, depends on the concrete. It depends on the physical. It's our physical perception of reality that's making us think that we are separate from each other and physical. So the Course in Miracles, do you know the Course in Miracles is about to give you a very clear definition of the ego. If you want to know what one of the Course in Miracles definitions of the ego, here it is. The ego is the part of the mind that believes your existence is defined by separation. So, what is the ego? The ego is the part of me that believes I'm separate. The ego is the part of my mind that believes I'm a separate person. Your ego is the part of you that believes you are a separate person. The ego is the part of your mind that believes you are separate from me and I am separate from you. The ego is the part of your mind that believes your existence is actually defined by being separate from everything and everybody else. So did you hear the Course in Miracles definition of the ego? So whenever the Course says the ego, it's talking about the part of your mind that believes your existence is defined by being a body and separate from everybody else. That's the ego. So to me, that sounds like the me that I think I am. I think I'm Earl Purdy. There's a part of me that thinks I'm Earl Purdy and it thinks that I'm a separate person that's separate from you. And there's a part of you that probably thinks that you are separate from me. Okay, the part of you that believes you're separate from me and the part of me that believes I'm separate from you, that is the ego. The ego is the part of the mind that believes your existence is defined by separation. Do you know that everything the ego perceives is a separate whole without the relationships that imply being? So when you look through your ego, when you look through the part of you that believes you're separate, then it looks like you see a whole lot of separate things, a whole lot of separate people. And the Course in Miracles says that the ego, what is the ego against? What is the part of you that believes you are a separate person? What is that part of you against? Well, the Course in Miracles says the ego is also another name for fearful thinking and fearful thought. So a fearful person, the ego, is against communication, except insofar as the communication is utilized to establish separateness rather than to abolish it. Now, what does that mean? That means that the ego, a person that thinks that they're separate, a person that believes that they're afraid, a regular human being, that part of you that thinks it's the regular human being that's separate, it says that that part of you is very willing to communicate as long as you're communicating about being separate from each other and different from each other. Do you know that if you will notice, most people are willing to talk about how we are separate and different from each other much more willingly than they are willing to talk about how we are connected and one with each other. You listen to most conversations, especially now, people are talking about the division and the separation and how we're not connected. So the ego is the part of you that's willing to talk as long as we are talking in such a way that we establish that we're different from each other and that we're separate from each other. So the communication system of the ego, the communication system of the regular fearful person, is based on its own way of thinking, as is everything else the ego dictates. So most people are communicating based on their own way of thinking. Most people who are separate and think they're separate, the ego, it communicates based on its own way of thinking. So I'm communicating based on my way of thinking. You're communicating based on your way of thinking. And there's a part of us, the Course says, that only wants to communicate actually to just establish how different we are, how separate we are. So the ego, the person that's the regular person that thinks they're a separate person, that person's communication, do you know it's controlled by the ego's need to protect itself? So that means that the average person is communicating, but that communication is controlled by my need to protect myself and to protect my way of thinking. That's why people debate with each other so much and challenge each other so much, because they want to protect their ego. They want to protect their way of thinking. So if I say something to you and it's not the way you think, then there would be a temptation for you to need to somehow control your communication with me based on your need to protect yourself. So the Course in Miracles is just basically saying the ego is the part of us that wants to be separate from everybody else. And the way that it communicates is based on the way that it believes, and that the average person's communication is controlled by their need to protect themselves. So the ego, what does the ego do? What is the part of your mind that believes its existence is defined by separation? What does that part of your mind do? Well, the ego will disrupt communication when it experiences threat. Like as a teacher, if I say something from A Course in Miracles and it's opposite to what a person believes, and that they feel threatened because what I'm saying from the Course in Miracles is different from what they believe, well, usually that person will disrupt communication. They'll want to ask a question, but the purpose of their question, according to the Course, is just to disrupt the communication because they're feeling threatened by the communication. So if they can interrupt what it is that I'm saying from the Course, then that is the way that the ego or the person would try to protect themselves. They feel threatened by something that they're hearing, so the ego in that person will disrupt communication when it experiences threat. I'm sure you've been in a situation where you're having a disagreement with someone and they just disrupt the communication and say, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm just going to leave right now. That's because your communication was perceived to be a threat to them, and their need to control themselves made them disrupt or end the communication that they're having with you. So people disrupt communication when they're feeling threatened by the communication. And the ego is the part of the mind that only wants to communicate if it's going to establish separation. So the ego is the part of the mind that believes its existence is defined by separation. That's why I say a regular person, or the ego is just another name for Earl. It's amazing how much, when I substitute my name for where it says ego, how much it makes total sense. Like, for instance, if I said the communication system of Earl, it's based on Earl's own thought system as it's everything else Earl dictates. Earl's communication is controlled by his need to protect himself, and Earl will disrupt communication when he experiences threat. See the difference when I put my name in there? Because if I think I'm a separate person, and I think I'm separate and different from you, then I'm basically being an ego. And when you first start to study the truth, that's what you basically are. I mean, your real identity isn't the ego, but the identity that you are identifying with is an identity that usually thinks it's a body and that it's separate. And so, do you know the Course in Miracles is talking about what that part of you will do when it feels threatened? So this disruption, this interruption of communication, do you know it is a reaction to a specific person or persons, right? When people break communication or disrupt communication, they're usually doing it as a reaction to a specific person. If I'm talking to somebody and I'm feeling threatened and I feel upset by what they're saying, and my communication is based on my thought system, and there's a part of me that wants to protect itself, and so my communication is controlled by my need to protect myself, then I'm going to disrupt communication when I experience a threat, when I'm in my ego, and that's going to be a specific reaction to a specific person or persons. So do you realize the specificity of your ego's thinking results in a spurious generalization, which really isn't abstract at all? So what does that mean, Earl? It means you are going to respond in certain specific ways to everything that you see as related. So we are always responding in certain specific ways based on our own thought system and the way we think. And when someone is saying something that's a threat to the way we think, then we will have a tendency to disrupt that communication because we are experiencing threat. And that disruption is going to be a reaction to a specific person, or it could be to a group of people. So you are always responding in certain specific ways to everything that you perceive as related in your life. Wow. So are you kind of seeing how intense this section is? I'm going to warn you. This is a very powerful section, but it can seem to be very abstract, but it's not. It's talking about creation and communication. So let's look at the next paragraph. Now, what the Course in Miracles always does is it tells us the way the ego operates, how our separate self operates, how our regular human mind operates. And then the Course in Miracles tells you exactly how your true self operates, your spiritual self. Because the Course is trying to teach us the difference between our real self and our false self. Because the Course in Miracles defines the ego as our false ideas about ourselves based on thinking that we're bodies and thinking that we're separate and believing in some form of guilt or fear. So now, in contrast, the Course is going to tell us how our spirit operates, how our right mind operates. Okay, so first we just heard how our ego operates and communicates. Now we're going to hear about how spirit, how our divine self, how our true self communicates. So God or spirit reacts in the same way to everything it knows is true. And that means that spirit doesn't respond at all to anything else. So when you wake up to your true spiritual identity as love, and you know that the only thing you want to focus on is truth and love, the Course in Miracles says, well, what's going to happen is you're going to stop responding to the ego at all. You're going to stop responding to people who believe in anger and guilt and grievances and separation. You're going to stop responding to people who want to attack and judge and hurt. When you're listening to the ego, the part of the mind that believes that its existence is defined by being separate, when you're listening to regular people, you're going to only respond to the things that they say that's based on truth and love, and you're going to eventually not respond at all to anything else. So when you get in touch with your true self, when you get in touch with your spirit self, are you aware that the Course in Miracles says your spirit doesn't make any attempt to establish what's true? So when you begin to really wake up, you won't be trying to prove anything to anybody. Like, for instance, I do not defend the teachings of A Course in Miracles. If somebody wants me to defend the Course, I never defend the Course, because you can choose to accept it or not accept it. That's up to you. I don't have to prove to you that the Course in Miracles is true, or even prove to you that the things that the Course in Miracles teaches is true, because I didn't create the Course in Miracles. I did not create this thought system. And since it's true, it's going to be true whether you believe it or not, and it's going to be true whether or not I believe it or not. So as you become more conscious, you're going to stop defending ideas, and you're going to stop defending anything. You know that if it's true, you don't have to defend it, because if it's true, it's going to be, that's the way it is, and it's going to be that way whether or not the other person believes it or accepts it or not. So spirit reacts in the same way to everything it knows is true, and doesn't respond at all to anything that's not true. So another way you could put that is that spirit responds to love and really doesn't respond at all to anything that's not love. It doesn't give that any reality. It doesn't give anything but love reality. Now, so what's true? So what is it that's actually true? Well, the Course says spirit knows that what is true is everything that God created. Everything that God created is what's true. So what is true? Anything that love created, anything that love created, anything that God creates, that's what's true. So only loving thoughts are true. Only loving thoughts are true. Fearful thoughts are not true. Thoughts of anger, guilt, and grievances are not true. By true, I mean they are not loving. They are not eternal. They do not create more love. So let's go back. Spirit reacts in the same way to everything it knows is true and doesn't respond at all to anything else. Spirit also doesn't make any attempt to establish what's true, because if you're an aware spiritual being, you know that what's true is everything that God created. The only thing that's true is what love creates. So that means that your spirit, your true self, your real self, your real self, your real self, your real self is not the ego. Your real self is not the self that thinks its existence is defined by being separate and in a body. That's not your real self. Your real self is spirit. So that means your real self reacts in the same way to everything it knows is true. It doesn't respond at all to anything else. It doesn't try to establish what is true. Your real self already knows that the only thing that's true is what our Creator created, that's the only thing that's true. And so that means your real self, your spirit, is in complete and direct communication with every aspect of creation. So right now, you're in complete and direct communication with everything. Your true self is in complete and in direct communication and joining with everything, because your true self is in complete and direct communication with God. So your true self is in communication with God. Your true self is in communication with spirit. Your true self is in communication with that which created us. Now, what is the will of God? Well, the Course in Miracles says, well, the will of God is this direct and complete communication. It is God's will that you be in communication with God. It is your Creator's will that you be in direct communication with your Creator. That is what God's will is. That is what the will of love is. So when you are in love with someone, when you are experiencing real love with someone, does that mean that you're in complete and direct communication without fear with that person? Absolutely. Communication is the will of God. Now, what is the Course in Miracles definition of communication? Because the Course in Miracles has its own definitions of the terms it uses. That's why you have to read A Course in Miracles and study A Course in Miracles and do the workbook lessons if you want to get the miracles and the blessings and the peace of mind that the Course in Miracles promises. Communication is the will of God. You and I joining minds in love and oneness, that is God's will. That is the will of love. So would you like to know how God created your mind? Would you like to know how God created every mind? Well, the Course in Miracles says God created every man by communicating God's mind to every man. So in other words, your Creator established you forever as a channel for the reception of God's mind or will. So you are a channel for the reception of God's mind. What are you? You are a channel. You are a channel. You are a channel for the reception of God's will. So you're here to be a channel to receive the will of God, and the will of God is love and joining and communication, joining minds, joining hearts. You are here to join. You are here for communication, and communication is joining. So you are a channel. Do you know every one of us are channels? What kind of channels are we? The Course says you are a channel for the reception of God's mind and God's will, which is perfect happiness. The Course in Miracles says God's will for you is complete happiness. Your Creator's will for you is total happiness. Your Creator wants you to have total happiness. Your Creator wants you to have complete and total happiness. Your Creator wants you to have complete and total happiness. True communication. Because you are in complete and direct communication with God. You are in complete and direct communication with God, your Creator. You may not realize it right now. You may not know it right now. Why don't you know that you're in complete and direct communication with God? Because you are identified with the part of your mind that believes your existence is defined by separation. So if you believe that you are separate, if you are absolutely certain that you are just a body, that you're just a human being that's separate from everyone else, well, you won't be aware of the direct communication that you have with your Creator, because the part of your mind that's in communication with God is not the part of your mind that thinks you are a separate being from everyone else. Wow. So who are the beings that can truly communicate? So who are the beings that can truly communicate? Only beings of a like order can truly communicate. So you communicate with beings that are like you. True communication actually happens with beings that are of a like order. not beings who think that they are separate and different and apart from each other. People who believe that they are separate and different and apart from everyone, these people are not actually practicing what the Course would call true communication, because beings of a like order, beings who know that they are spirit, those are the beings that can truly join and truly communicate. So how do God's creations communicate? So as a creation of God, as a creation of love, because God is love, God is love, God is love. So as a creation of love, how do you naturally communicate? Well, to communicate naturally, you communicate with God and you communicate like God. So natural communication is a communication that is communicated with love, and a natural communication is a communication that is like love. So you're not really communicating with somebody when you're communicating fear. You're not really communicating with someone when you're communicating anger, or when you're communicating guilt, or when you're projecting, or when you're being unforgiving. That when you're talking to someone in anger, when you're talking to someone in anger and guilt and fear, that's not true communication. True communication is a communication between beings of a like order, who see themselves as one and see themselves as the same, and who are communicating with love and communicating like love. So the next time that you see a person who's angry and upset, and they'll call themselves communicating with somebody while they are angry and upset, they're not. True communication doesn't come from fear. True communication doesn't come from anger and separation and guilt. So this communication that's like true communication, what is this true communication that's like God? What is that communication like? Well, it says right here, this communication is perfectly abstract. So that means the quality of real communication is universal in application. So true communication, a communication that is real, is going to be a communication that doesn't have any judgment in it. It doesn't have any exception. Truly loving communication, true communication, is not subject to any judgment, is not subject to any exception, is not subject to any alteration. So true communication is a communication that's based on love, and a communication that's based on oneness, and a communication that's based on freedom, and that never changes. Real communication is always loving, it's always peaceful, it's always based on oneness, it's always based on spirit, and that never changes. It's not loving communication one minute and then angry and fearful communication the next minute. That is not real communication. So most people are not solving their relationship problems because they're not really communicating with each other, if they are communicating with each other from the perspective that they are separate from each other, that this is another person that I'm trying to communicate with. There is no other person. There is no other person. There's nothing outside you. There's nothing but you. Everything you see is you. That's all you're seeing. But you are identifying with the part of you that thinks you are a person, that thinks it's separate. So that sounds crazy when I say that to a person that's a regular human being, or in their concrete mind. I like that. The ego is just another term for the concrete mind. So God created you by communication, and God created you for communication. Your creator communicated you into existence. You were spoken into existence in a sense. You were communicated into existence. And you also were created for communication. You are here to join. You are here to join minds. You are here to join minds in love. You are here to be a channel for the reception of God's love, and to allow that love and that truth to be extended out into your experience through you. That's why you're really here. It's not for the normal things that most people think they're in the world for: power, fame, money, and physical pleasure. What you're really here for is to be the light of the world. You're really here to be the communicator of love and truth in this world, because it's not going to be here on the outer until it's happening on the inner. So do you know your mind can distort its function? You can think you're here for some other reason other than teaching only love. You can think you're here for any other reason you can make up other than demonstrating the truth. But that's your mind distorting its function. But even though you can distort your functions, you cannot endow yourself with functions you weren't given. So you can come up with what you think of as your own purposes. You can come up with what you think of as your own plans and your own hopes and wishes. That's fine. But you can't endow yourself with functions you weren't given. And you were given the function of creating and communicating and extending love. That's what you're really here for. So that means that you cannot lose the ability to communicate. Do you know that your mind can't lose the ability to join? Even, even though your mind can utilize, I love it, your mind can utilize, your mind might refuse to utilize your communication on behalf of being. In other words, you can refuse to communicate on behalf of your own being and on behalf of your own existence. You can communicate in ways that's not beneficial to who and what you really are. So remember, real communication is communication that is the extension of love, which is the extension of oneness, which is the extension of freedom. And a person that's communicating anything other than love, oneness, and freedom and joining is actually a person who's not communicating at all. And of course, if you're not communicating truly at all, then of course there's going to be misperception, there's going to be separation, and the person is going to be tempted to disrupt communication that it feels is a threat to its own way of thinking. Have you noticed that sometimes when you're just honestly just sharing your own thoughts, your own beliefs, people constantly interrupt you and try to correct you? Well, they're interrupting you and trying to correct you because based on their way of thinking, what you just said was a threat to that. So they disrupt the communication. That's what the Course is saying. It's saying that that's not real communication. Real communication, real communication is communication that's based on love. I'm going to keep on mentioning that. So what is it that rests on communication? Listen to me. Existence as well as being rest on communication. Do you know that your existence rests on joining minds in love? That is what communication is. Extending love, extending freedom, extending the truth. Say real communication isn't you telling somebody whether you like their dress or not, or whether or not you being honest about what you feel about the furniture that they bought. That's not communication. Communication is the joining minds in love and oneness. That is communication. So existence as well as being rest on what? Existence rests on communication. Your being rests on communication. So physical existence is just another name for the ego. Existence in this context is just another name for the ego. Physical, concrete, physical mind. So do you know that existence, now if you're following me in the book, wherever you see existence, say ego, and watch, you'll get a whole new meaning. Existence, which is the ego, however, is specific in how, what, and with whom communication is judged to be worth undertaking, right? The average person is very specific about who they think communication is worth undertaking with. Have you ever said that I don't even believe that it's even valuable for me to even talk to this person? I'm not going to even talk to this person. Well, right, because your ego is very specific and how, what, and with whom communication is judged to be worth undertaking. So the ego judges who's worth talking to, but being, which is God in you, the divine in you, the spirit in you, is completely without these distinctions. So what does that mean? Well, being your true being, is a state in which your mind is in communication with everything that is real. So when you're in touch with your being, when you're in touch with who you are, then you are in a state where you are enjoining and in communication with everything that's real. So do you know that to whatever extent you permit this state to be curtailed, what state to be curtailed? When you decide that some beings are not worth communicating with. And you're right. Some people are not worth communicating with if you're going to be communicating from fear, anger, separation, and guilt. If you're coming from a negative, fearful place, you just need to be quiet. Because what you're about to do has nothing to do with real communication and real joining. Because nothing real is based on separation. So if I'm going to have a conversation with you about anything, and I think you are separate from me and I think I'm separate from you, then I'm already initiating the conversation from a place of unreality and untruth. Because you are not separate from me. You are not different from me. We are all one. We are one self. We are one being. We are one being. We are one being. We are one being. We are one self, united with our Creator. That's what we are. So your ego is the part of you that thinks you are this separate person. So what is the ego? The ego is you. The you that thinks that you are different and separate and in a body that dies one day. That is the ego. So when the Course in Miracles talks about the ego, it's really talking about the average person that you see in your perception that seems to be a person separate from everybody else, who thinks that some people are worth communicating with, some people are not. We're talking about people who believe that they need to interrupt any communication that's a threat to their way of thinking. That's the ego. But your real self isn't like that. Your real self isn't like that. So to whatever extent you permit this state of real communication to be curtailed, then do you know you are limiting your sense of your own reality? So how do you make the sense of your own reality be total? How do you get in touch with that real being that you are? Well, you got to recognize all of reality. Okay, I'm going to tell you how you do it. You have to recognize all of reality in its context, its glory, in the glorious context of its real relationship to you. You've got to recognize the relationship that you have with all that is. You have a relationship with all that is. You are in relationship with all that is. You are in relationship with all that is. You are in relationship with all that is. Do you know you won't have any sense of your divine reality until you realize that you are in relationship to all of reality. You are not separate from anything you see. But if you're looking through your ego, if you're looking through the part of you that believes that you are a separate body, then you are not in touch with your true being. You're not in touch with your true self. And it's your true self that's in complete and direct, it's your true self that's in complete and direct communication with God. And it's your true self that's in complete and direct communication with everyone and everything. And your real self, it doesn't defend itself. Your real self doesn't try to establish what's true. Your real self just responds to love and only to love. And it doesn't give anything else its energy or attention or see anything else other than love as what's really real. Now, this could be threatening to your ego. Some of the things that I'm saying from A Course in Miracles could be very confusing and threatening to your sense of separate self. But do you know, I'm not really talking to your ego. I'm not really talking to the part of you that just thinks you are a human being only. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to the real you, the true you, the loving you, the you that is in direct communication with everything and all that is. Wow. So this is your reality. Don't desecrate your reality. Don't recoil from your reality. Your reality is your real home, your real temple. Your reality is your real self. So what am I saying to you? I'm saying to you that you may not realize it right now, especially if you're new to A Course in Miracles. You may not realize it right now, but you are not who you think you are. You are not who you think you are. You are not who you think you are if you think that you are a separate being on your own, autonomous, self-sufficient, that can be a victim to things and forces that are greater than you. That part of you that believes that is the ego. That is not you. So when someone says love your brother or sister, when the Course says love your brother, it's not talking about love that person's ego. It's not saying love that person, that part of that person that projects and gets angry and judges and condemns and attacks. And it's not, the Course in Miracles is not saying for you to be spiritual, you're supposed to love craziness, and that you're supposed to love insanity, and that you're supposed to love something or somebody that's being unloving, because that's not ultimately who that person really is. That's their ego. That's their ego. The people you think that are acting ugly and unloving and uncaring and think that they're separate, that is not the Son of God. That is not the child of God. That is not who the Course in Miracles is talking to or talking about. Do you know the Course in Miracles is talking about you, the real you, the real you, the true you. The true you only responds to love and doesn't respond to anything else. The true you is in complete and direct communication with God. The true you, the real you, is in direct and complete communication with everything and everyone. The real you communicates love to everyone equally and doesn't choose some people to have loving joining and communication with, and then some people that it thinks is not worth communicating with. That's the ego, the false self that does that. So this reality of love in your being that I'm talking about, that you is what the Course in Miracles is removing the blocks to you actually realizing. So when you do the Course in Miracles, you're removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, truth's presence in you. Your real self is covered up by the conditioning and the things that you've learned and been taught since you were a child. So your ego is just another term for your conditioning. And most people are just programmed, acting from the conditioning that they got from the time they were born. They bought into the part of their mind that believes that they are separate. But the Course in Miracles is saying that's not the real you. That is not the true you. The true you is in direct and complete communication with God and with love. So I want you to take a breath. I'm going to do a quick review and recap of what I've covered. I'm Earl Purdy. I'm a full-time teacher of A Course in Miracles. If you'd like to make a donation, I truly would appreciate that. Just go to my website, www.earlpurdy.com. That's Purdy, P-U-R-D-Y. You can also use Zelle, Venmo, the Cash App, and PayPal. All you need is my email address. My email address is earlpurdy@earlpurdy.com. earlpurdy@earlpurdy.com. I'm also available for mentoring, counseling, and coaching, depending on what you need. I've had over 40 years of working with the Course in Miracles and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different students to help them apply the Course in Miracles to situations and circumstances that they're dealing with, that they want a healing in. If you would like to have a one-on-one session with me, it's called a Clarity Session. Go to my website, look under the Clarity Session tab, and it explains in detail my services, and you can self-book an appointment right from my website. I have also been a professional sole purpose astrologer numerologist for over 40 years. So if you'd like to work with me in that capacity, and have me do an interpretation of your chart to help you also actualize everything that I've been talking about, including what the Course in Miracles is teaching, then I'm available. Just go to my website. I'm going to start a class soon on Zoom, a private class on Zoom for people who are dedicated, committed Course in Miracles students who read it and study it on a regular basis, and are also hopefully doing the workbook lessons, and who want to learn with me and through me. Okay? Someone who doesn't resonate with me, then I wouldn't be the right person. But I want to work with the people that want to work with me on a deeper level so that I can give you the benefit of 40 years of teaching and studying the course and save you some time. Because the ego is great. People's egos are great at jamming them up with the Course in Miracles and getting them to misinterpret what it's saying and then create drama and chaos for themselves. So I can save you a lot of time. So I'm available. Go to my website. On Sundays at 1 p.m. Mountain Time, Sundays, 1 p.m. Mountain Time, I do another Course in Miracles class on Facebook Live, and I also do it before a live audience. So if you're in the Denver, Colorado area and you want to come and check it out, I'm at 1555 Race Street in Denver, Colorado. 1555 Race Street at 80206. And then on Thursdays, we do what we're doing right now, hardcore Course in Miracles. That's especially geared toward Course in Miracles students, even though everybody's welcome to watch. So that's on the Earl Purdy page. Earl Purdy page. Would you please share this video? Would you do that for me? Would you share this video? It doesn't take long to do it. Just share the video. And that allows other people to benefit from what we're doing. So here is the review right quick. And I appreciate you all. I appreciate you more than you can ever imagine, because we are remembering together. We are the mighty companions. And the Course in Miracles says over and over again, remember, 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 don't forget. Remember, 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 don't forget. The ego is the part of your mind that believes your existence is defined by separation. What is the ego? The ego is the you that believes you are separate from me. Your ego is the part of you that tells you, I am a man over here named Earl, and you are whatever your name is, and you are separate from me, and you are separate from everybody else. That is not really the truth. That is your ego telling you this. The part of you that believes that your existence is separate from God, separate from me, and separate from everyone else. So an ego person, an ego mind, a regular person, they are against communication. That part of the mind is against communication unless you're using that communication to talk about how separate we are, how different we are. So a regular person's communication, the ego's communication, is based on the person's thought system. People's communication is based on their way of thinking. So when you're talking to a regular person, when you're talking to an asleep person, do you know that their communication is really controlled by their need to protect themselves? Most people's communication, until they wake up to who they really are, they are communicating from a defensive place, a place where they are really wanting to protect themselves. And do you know that when a person is in fear, when a person is in their ego, that person is going to disrupt communication when they experience threat. So the ego is not real communication. Communication that's coming from separation isn't real communication. Communication from anger, guilt, and grievances is not real communication. If I'm talking to you, and I'm talking to you from the perspective that you are not me, that you are not connected to me and I'm not connected to you, that is not real communication. That is not true communication. So your spirit, what does your spirit do? What does your spirit do? Well, spirit reacts in the same way to everything it knows is true. If it's true, I'm going to react from a place of truth and love and peace and innocence. I'm going to want to express innocence and peace and love with everybody. I'm going to react the same way to everything that I know is true. If I know gravity is true, every day I'm going to react the same way to gravity. I'm not going to jump over a balcony because I know that that's true. And that's going to be true all the time. So I'm going to react the same way to everything I know is true. And I'm learning not to respond to the ego at all. I'm learning how not to respond at all to anything that isn't true, anything that isn't love, anybody that's not peaceful. When I'm around people who really want to attack and they're angry and they are not recognizing their oneness with me, and they feel threatened, well, I'm going to be quiet as much as possible and just breathe and give them to the Holy Spirit. I'm going to give them to God. I'm going to say, I give you to the Holy Spirit as part of myself. I know that you will be released unless I want to imprison myself. In the name of my freedom, I choose your release because I recognize that we will be released together. That's what I'm saying in my mind that the Course in Miracles taught me. So when I'm in the presence of unconsciousness, when I'm in the presence of a person who doesn't know I am one with them, then I am going to give them to the Holy Spirit. I'm going to give them to the loving Spirit. And I'm not going to try to establish what's true with them because I know that what's true is everything that love created, that the only thing that is true is what God created. I'm no longer going to give reality to anger, guilt, and grievances and attack. I'm not going to say that that's what's real and that the love is the illusion, that kindness is an illusion, that trusting people is an illusion. I don't care what's going on in the world. And you can cite anything that you think is going on in the world that should make me want to be untrustworthy or make me be suspicious or unkind. But if at all possible, I'm going to try to come from a place of spirit, a place of love. Now, I may not always pull it off, because if I already knew how to be unconditionally loving at all times, then I wouldn't have any need to study A Course in Miracles. So don't forget this statement here. Readiness is not mastery. Readiness is not mastery. Just because you're ready to be a more loving, giving, kind person, it doesn't mean that you've mastered it yet. So don't beat yourself up if you can't pull it off. If you go to flight school and that's your intention is to go to flight school, then you wouldn't beat yourself up because you couldn't fly a plane the first day. So be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Because the only thing that's true is what God created. And what God created is what love created. Do you know what the will of God is? The will of God is communication. The will of God is communication. So what is communication? Well, the Course in Miracles says communication is the extension of joining minds. Joining minds. That's communication. When we're joining in our thoughts, when we're joining in love, that's communication. All the rest of the stuff that we call communication, the Course in Miracles says there ain't no communication. That's just ego. That's just pure fear. That's just separation thoughts. So real communication is coming from a loving place. And real communication, loving communication, true joining, it doesn't have any judgment in it. There are no exceptions. It's going to go out to everybody equally. And that love and that true communication is not going to change. It's not going to have any kind of alteration. So only beings of a like order can truly communicate. So the easiest people to communicate with are those who want to be loving just like you, those who want to be free just like you. So God's creations naturally communicate with God and like God. What does that mean? You have to start communicating with love and communicating like love. So your mind can distort its function, but you can't give yourself functions that you weren't given. So you will never, never totally lose the ability to join. You will never totally lose the ability to communicate, even though you can refuse to utilize it on behalf of your being. You got to listen to this over and over and over again. So I've just described to you your reality versus the part of you that's not the true you. So this is your real self. So the next time you're in the presence of someone who's not really communicating because they're coming from fear and anger and projection and guilt, try to pause, take a breath, and tell them, I give you to the Holy Spirit. I give you to the Holy Spirit. I give you to love. I give you to God. I give you to God as part of myself. I know that you will be released unless I want to imprison myself. In the name of my freedom, I choose your release because I recognize that we will be released together. That prayer is at the end of chapter 15 in the Course in Miracles text. And do you know, I would highly advise you to learn that prayer, because it's those prayers in the Course in Miracles and learning those prayers that you generate the state of mind that allows the miracles and the healing that the Course in Miracles promises. So, mighty companions, thank you for remembering with me again. We are the rememberers. We are the mighty companions. And remember, the Course says you change your mind through repetition, hearing it over and over again. So listen and watch this class at least 4 times. At least 4 times. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. Thank you, each and every one of you. I look at all your comments. And may the Course be with you. I have tons of classes on YouTube, tons of classes on Facebook, and on my website that you can watch for free. I love you.